The idea is there. You can feel it. The version of yourself that reads more, thinks faster, solves harder problems, produces more from the same hours. You have glimpsed it. On good days, in good weeks, when things aligned, you operated closer to it. Then the alignment shifted, and the default returned, the path of least resistance, the easy input over the difficult output, the comfortable shallowness of a brain that has learned it can coast and still survive. That is not your brain at capacity. That is your brain on the habits it was given. The brain is not a fixed instrument. It is a trainable one. The capacity you have glimpsed on your best days is not a lucky exception. It is the direction the brain moves when the daily inputs change. 10 specific inputs. Each one targets a different mechanism in the cognitive system. Together, they do not make you smarter. They stop the daily choices that were making you operate as if you were. Tony Stark's intelligence was not the variable that separated him from everyone else. It was what he chose to do with his brain every single day. What he fed it, what he demanded of it, what he refused to let it coast on, that produced the gap between his output and everyone around him. These 10 habits are that discipline made specific. Here is every one. Habit 1: read something difficult for 20 minutes before any passive consumption begins. Not easy reading. Something that requires genuine cognitive effort to follow. A book that challenges the current level of understanding. An argument that requires slow parsing to assess. The brain, like any trainable system, adapts to the demands placed on it. A brain fed a daily diet of frictionless content adapts toward frictionless processing. A brain that begins every day with something that requires effort adapts toward effortful processing. 20 minutes before anything easier. The sequence is the training. Habit 2. Write one original thought every morning. Not a journal of feelings. One idea, articulated in writing, that did not exist in written form before you wrote it. The act of writing forces the brain to convert vague impressions into precise language, which is the cognitive operation that most closely resembles the thinking required for original problem solving. A man who writes one original thought daily builds, over months, a compounding archive of his own reasoning, and a brain increasingly capable of the precision that archive requires. Habit 3. Protect the first hour from algorithmic input. No feed, no recommendations, no content chosen by an external system designed to serve engagement rather than your development. The algorithm is optimized for your attention, not your growth. Every morning hour spent inside, it trains the brain toward reactive, stimulus-driven processing, the exact opposite of the deliberate, self-directed thinking that produces original output. Stark didn't open the feed first. He opened the problem first. Same hour, different input, completely different brain by noon. Habit 4. Solve one problem you don't already know the answer to every day. Not a task, a genuine problem, where the solution requires thinking rather than execution. A decision with real trade-offs. A question that could be answered multiple ways. An argument to be assessed rather than accepted. The brain's problem-solving capacity, like any capacity, grows through use and atrophies through disuse. A daily practice of genuine problem-solving, even small problems, even brief sessions, maintains and builds the cognitive muscle that coasting erodes. Stay with habits 5 through 10. The first 4 build the input. What comes next optimizes the processing, and habit 8 is the one that produces the most immediate and most underestimated improvement in cognitive output of anything on this list. Habit 5. Move the body daily with genuine effort. Not a walk. Movement that elevates heart rate and demands physical output. The relationship between physical exertion and cognitive performance is not motivational, it is physiological. Sustained cardiovascular effort increases blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, elevates the availability of the neurochemicals that support learning and memory, and reduces the cognitive fog that accumulates in a sedentary body. The brain that follows a session of genuine physical effort processes faster and retains more than the brain that followed an hour of sitting. This is not a performance optimization tip. It is basic maintenance. Habit 6. Teach something you learned this week to someone else, or write it out as if teaching it. The act of explaining forces a level of understanding that reading alone never produces. You cannot explain what you only approximately know. The gaps surface immediately and precisely. Stark didn't just build things, he understood them at the level required to explain every component to someone who had never seen it before. That level of understanding is built through the act of articulation, not through the act of absorption. One explanation per week is enough to transform how deeply the week's learning was actually processed. Habit 7. Sit with one difficult question for 5 minutes without reaching for the answer. Phone down. Search engine closed. Just the question and the brain working on it. The reflex to immediately search what is not known has replaced the cognitive process of reasoning toward an answer, and that replacement has a cost. The brain's reasoning capacity, its ability to hold a problem in working memory and turn it, is built through practice. Every time the search reflex fires before the reasoning has had a chance to begin, the reasoning capacity goes unexercised. 5 minutes of sitting with a question before searching is 5 minutes of building what the search reflex has been quietly dismantling. Habit 8. Sleep 7 to 8 hours and treat it as cognitive infrastructure. Sleep is when the brain consolidates the day's learning, clears metabolic waste accumulated during waking hours, and restores the prefrontal cortex's capacity for the effortful thinking that every other habit on this list requires. A brain operating on insufficient sleep is not operating at reduced capacity in the way a tired body is. It is operating with impaired judgment, reduced working memory, and a compromised ability to assess its own performance, meaning it cannot tell how poorly it is doing. Every habit on this list is built on top of adequate sleep, or it is built on sand. Habit 9. Consume one piece of long-form content weekly that requires genuine attention to follow. A long essay, a documentary with actual argument, a book chapter that cannot be skimmed and retained. The brain adapts to the average length and depth of the content it processes. A brain that has only ever processed short-form content develops a processing speed optimized for short-form, fast, surface-level, completion rewarding. One weekly engagement with genuinely long-form material maintains and develops the capacity for sustained depth that short-form progressively erodes. Habit 10. Review what you learned today in 3 sentences before sleep. Not a diary, 3 sentences naming what was encountered, what it means, and one question it raises. The act of review forces consolidation, the same mechanism that sleep then deepens. A man who reviews briefly and specifically before sleep arrives at the next day, with yesterday's learning already processed to a level that passive consumption never reaches. Over 30 days, that review practice produces a compounding archive of processed understanding that the man who consumed the same material without reviewing it simply does not have. You came into this thinking the lazy brain was the problem, that you needed to fix something broken, unlock a capacity that was absent, access a level of intelligence that others had and you were missing. The capacity is present. It has always been present. What is absent is the daily demand for it. A brain given no reason to operate at depth will not operate at depth, not because it cannot, but because the daily inputs it has been given do not require it to. Every habit on this list is a daily demand, a specific requirement placed on a specific cognitive mechanism that responds to demand the same way muscle responds to load, by adapting, by growing, by becoming more capable of the thing it is repeatedly asked to do. The lazy brain is not a deficient brain, it is an undemanded one. Start demanding. Tonight, install 3. The 3 that address the specific mechanisms where your brain is currently running on the least demanding input available. Write them as behaviors. When they happen, where they happen, what specifically they require. Tomorrow morning, run the first one before anything passive enters the day. 20 minutes of something difficult before the feed opens. One original thought written before the first scroll. One problem held in the mind before the search engine is reached. Any one of the 3. The sequence matters less than the fact of the demand being made before the default takes over. Stark's output was not produced by extraordinary intelligence. It was produced by extraordinary daily demand on ordinary intelligence, by a man who refused to let the brain coast when it could think, refused to let it consume when it could produce, refused to let it be comfortable when it could be capable. That refusal, held daily, is the entire gap between the version of yourself you have glimpsed and the version that showed up this morning instead. Your brain is not lazy. It is undisciplined. And undisciplined means it has been given every reason to coast and no daily reason to reach. Give it the reason. Today, not when you feel ready. 3 habits. Tomorrow, written down before this video closes and the intention dissolves. The full potential you have been waiting to unlock is not behind a threshold you haven't crossed yet. It is the direction the brain moves when the daily inputs change. Change 3 of them tonight. The movement begins tomorrow morning. One question. Which of the 10, name the number, is the demand your brain has been avoiding most consistently? Drop it in the comments. That avoidance is the exact location of the growth. That habit is the first one to install. If this reframed potential from something to unlock to something to demand, subscribe. More of this. No brain supplements required.